This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 3 minutes after 10. Let me just run something by you as an illustration, perhaps, of a rarely noted problem. What do you think the current casualty count for Russia alone is as a consequence of the Ukraine war? Just have a swing at it. And obviously, if you know the answer to this, then you are the exception that perhaps proves the rule that I'm about to observe. I was asked that question earlier today, and my answer was 250,000. I got a little bit confused because I thought it meant deaths, but the question was actually casualties. But either way, what would you say the total casualties, including deaths, was? It's about 1 million. So there's a study that came out in June from the US-based Centre for Strategic and International Studies. It's very hard to get accurate figures, particularly from the Russian side. It's much easier from the Ukrainian side, where it is estimated that between 60 and 100,000 people have been killed and 400,000 casualties have been recorded. So, and it is about 250,000 deaths for the Russian military. So you've got, give or take, 1.5 million human casualties in this war. And that was from the end of June, so it will be a little higher now. And it's on VJ Day, on the 80th anniversary of VJ Day. It's easy, isn't it, I forget the exact quote, but the idea that there's a point at which a number becomes too big to properly process. Do you know what I mean? It's much easier to conceive of figures that we can visualize. You know, if you imagine a classroom full of people, a studio full of people, a building, an office full of people, you can get your head around that. It's why journalists often reach for quite strange metrics. Double-decker buses are always used, aren't they, to convey space or distance, or it's 4 Wembleys, or we use football stadia, because sometimes a number is too big to actually visualise, to actually conceive of. It's always true in war, I think, because casualties very quickly become statistics. But that's 1 million humans on the Russian side alone, 1.5 million humans, all of whom, of course, had 2 parents, many of whom will have had children, siblings, wives, husbands, partners. 1.5 million human beings. And today, the men and women from both sides of that war will watch 2 of the most hideous human beings ever to achieve high national office meet to discuss their future, meet ostensibly to discuss the idea that they are dedicated to a cessation of hostilities, that there has already been too much death. Something that I don't think Vladimir Putin thinks even in his darkest moments. That is, to me, and I don't know that I would have come in this way round if it wasn't for the very moving commemorations of VJ Day, which we'll mark with 2 minutes silence, by the way, at 12 noon today. That I think it was Stalin. Neil thinks it was Stalin as well. 1 death is a tragedy. 1,000 deaths is a statistic. What is 250, 300,000 plus deaths? I don't know. So as you read into some of the scene setting for today's summit in Alaska, 2 things occur to me. The first is how we have failed, all of us, properly to recalibrate our language, our commentary, our reporting, to recognise the fact that you have 2 objectively hideous human beings in the room. 2 objectively hideous human beings, whether in their personal lives or their political lives. You have moral depravity on a scale that is close to unique, I think. It wouldn't be unheard of to have 1 person sitting on the side of a negotiating table, in Yalta, for example, to go back to Joseph Stalin, but to have both sides of a negotiation essentially represented by moral bankruptcy is absolutely extraordinary. And we haven't risen to the challenge, have we? As a not just as a profession, as a media, but as a population, as a public. We haven't risen to the challenge of reporting all of this stuff through the lenses of the personal and public depravity of both of these men. Donald Trump's lies are now so commonplace and so huge that many of us have perhaps given up trying properly to track them, whereas Vladimir Putin is probably the richest man in the world as a consequence of everything that he has stolen from the Russian people, dedicated, as dictators throughout the ages are, to staying in power in order to avoid cosmic justice or karmic justice or simple criminal justice. And that is the fate not just of the Ukrainian people, but also of the next phalanx of Russians that will be marched to their death by Vladimir Putin. And the second thing you take away from today's scene setting is a very real sense, and perhaps something we haven't properly clocked on this programme, that Putin has already won. I mean, there are a number of reasons for this, but he is meeting the American president on American soil after essentially asking for the meeting. He hasn't been required to make a single tangible concession. So you have a man wanted, of course, by the International Criminal Court, known to be a kleptocrat on an almost medieval scale, responsible for oppression, the murder, of course, of opponents, the oppression of his own people, the extraordinary death sentences signed for in excess of 250,000 Russian troops, a monstrous man by any measure, effectively now having the President of the United States of America, a position that was once synonymous with being the leader of the free world, at the end of a phone line, on the end of a leash. I want a meeting, and I want it in Alaska. I want to come and I want to meet on American soil. Many countries in the world would be required to arrest him the moment that he landed, but not Donald Trump's America. So that is a massive symbolic victory, and he's after another one. He is after a land grab. Donald Trump will be turning... Do you know... I mean, I know it happened in Gaza as well, but the use of the phrase beachfront property in a conversation about a war that has left hundreds of thousands of people dead makes my skin crawl. It really does. I'm pretty sure this didn't happen in previous conversations. When the three great powers met in 1945 to carve up the world effectively in Yalta, I'm pretty sure nobody, even Joseph Stalin, who of course did turn out to be a murderous dictator, I'm pretty sure nobody talked about beachfront property. I'm pretty sure none of the commentary, none of the worthy hand-wringing chroniclers of that moment would have been even aware of the possibility of beachfront property playing a part. We already know it has done in Gaza, thanks to Donald Trump's social media accounts and more, and I've seen it in some of the coverage of what Donald Trump is likely to be tickled with in Alaska today. He wants a territorial swap in eastern Ukraine, Vladimir Putin, something that the White House are so already amenable to that Trump has already suspended plans to impose new sanctions and instead agreed to this grand summit, which I presume plays as an enormous PR win back in Moscow, back in Russia. He also, of course, murdered a British citizen on UK soil, or sent goons to do so, a name I've committed to memory because it's so easily overlooked, given that Dawn Sturgis was not the target of the goons sent here to murder the Skripals, father and daughter, in Salisbury. And, of course, she is not the only one. But he gets this victory. He gets essentially the red carpet rolled out in Alaska today by a man whose job was once synonymous with being leader of the free world. And I don't know what Donald Trump can do to bend Vladimir Putin to his will, but I do know that he probably doesn't want to. He sees no desire at all beyond headlines to actually curtail Putin's murderous excesses. And this is the point Zelensky makes so powerfully. This is the point Zelensky makes so powerfully, that even if they do cobble together some sort of concord, he is no more likely to stick to it than he was to be satisfied with the invasion of Crimea in 2014. So you don't trust snakes. And leopards don't change their spots. And yet here we are, still using the same vocabulary, still using the same analytic framework, still using the same language to describe something that is, I believe, utterly unprecedented. Utterly unprecedented. And God knows how it would feel today if you were Ukrainian, watching this meeting between two men who've appointed themselves as the arbiters of your peace without allowing you into the room at all. Well, about us, but without us. It's an extraordinary moment. Extraordinary moment. I mean, I've asked you a few times whether or not Europe can rise to this challenge. And I will ask you again today. We've been blessed with some incredibly informed answers to that question this week and this year and last year and beyond. If the worst happens, which would be essentially a carve-up of territory that is not theirs to carve up, then would Europe be able to rise to this challenge? The diplomacy that's underway with Zelensky's visit to this country and meetings with European allies, I don't know whether or not there is any way in which they can bring enough pressure to bear upon proceedings to provide Ukraine with something that looks attractive. But, I mean, how mad would it sound to say to you today that Putin's already won? Putin won this the moment that Donald Trump beat Joe Biden in the US presidential election. Biden was far from a perfect ally to the Ukrainian people, but my goodness me, the idea that Putin was going to walk away with whatever he wanted was a lot harder to imagine if Biden had been in the White House than it is now. Has Zelensky already lost? Is this summit the proof that he has already lost? Rolling out the red carpet on American soil for the Russian president without receiving anything in return is already a major victory. It's a massive win. Symbolic, yes, but still huge. And Zelensky is not there. I don't think we can exaggerate the significance of those two simple facts. Putin gets to be treated like an equal, and Zelensky doesn't get invited at all. Could Donald Trump make it any clearer that he isn't just an apologist for Vladimir Putin, but he's an admirer, a cheerleader, and a facilitator? I don't know. It was Kamala Harris, not Biden, sorry. One slip, nobody's perfect. That was a little tribute to Joe Biden there, a slip of the memory. 10:16 is the time. If Kamala Harris had been in the White House, then you could not imagine this summit in Alaska today actually happening. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need to answer one of two questions, or of course both, or as ever on this programme to bring something to the table which we have missed already, and they are very different questions, so don't feel you have to answer both of them. The first is, has Putin already won? How big a victory has Putin already won? Before we even know what happens in the room where it happens, the fact that this meeting is taking place in the way that it is taking place, if you are not in the room, you are on the menu. Another figure of speech. How big a victory has Putin already won? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And then the second question, which I don't think we can stop asking until this is over. And when it is over, as I've said, it's unlikely to be over forever. But the second question is, can 21st century Europe rise to the challenge presented by 21st century Russia and the desertion from any form of moral or military leadership of 21st century America? So how big a victory has Putin already won? And you can tell me, and I hope you do, but I'm not sure I'm going to believe you, that he hasn't won any victory at all. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And then the question of what can Europe do? Who even knows the answers to those questions? What can Europe do? If they come out of that room this weekend, maybe later today, they come out of that room with a map, a new map, upon which Vladimir Putin, if Vladimir Putin is happy, then he has succeeded in conquering sovereign territory, sovereign Ukrainian territory. Zelensky, it is almost impossible to conceive of him being happy with something that makes Vladimir Putin happy. If they carve it up today in Alaska, what can Europe and Volodymyr Zelensky do about it? 0345 6060 973. Help me out with this, because, you know, I'm curious and I'm engaged and I'm not stupid. But there are questions that we can only answer together and never completely. And these are two of the biggest. Question number one, how big a victory has Putin already won? All of the clever commentary I'm reading today begins with lines like this from the senior foreign correspondent of The Telegraph. To a degree, Vladimir Putin has already won. What has he won? And how big a degree has he won it by? And secondly, if they do what many fear and carve up Ukraine to the satisfaction of Vladimir Putin, what on earth, come Monday, when I won't be here, but what on earth could Ukraine and her allies do in the event of the kind of carve-up that many observers fear? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. It's 20 past 10.
James O'Brien on LBC.
21 minutes after 10. Do we need help understanding why Vladimir Putin has already won a significant victory? I think perhaps we do. 0345 6060 973. And in the event of Putin and Trump cobbling together the kind of carve-up that many people feel in Alaska today, where does that leave Ukraine and indeed the whole of Europe, or Ukraine and her allies? Where does it leave them? What is the new world order in which we can contemplate the kind of carve-up that is on the cards? I don't know whether it will happen or not, but that is the only light at the end of the tunnel for this particular meeting, something that satisfies Putin's imperial appetites. What would that mean for Ukraine and for Europe? Peter is in Gillingham. Peter, what would you like to say?
Well, I'm disgusted of Gillingham this morning, James.
Oh, no.
I was listening to BBC PM last night, and Katie Razzle had the temerity to suggest that the only man in the world capable of negotiating a peace was Donald Trump. I mean, my cat could do that, and my cat is dead.
Well, thank you. I heard the same programme that you had. I'm a big admirer of Katie Razzle, and
yes, indeed.
And I mean, what she was pointing out was that the President of the United States of America is the only office significant enough to bring influence to bear on the President of Russia in pursuit of peace. So it isn't quite as you portray.
I agree with that. Yeah. However, some people will have heard it differently.
Maybe.
Yeah, and then the NATO envoy went on, since you heard it, to say that Donald was a marvellous media person. I mean, he spent 2 minutes riffing on Medium the other day. No, he's not actually very good at media. He confuses people.
Let's nudge towards what is likely to happen in this room, and the question of the carve-up that many people fear, a sense of a new map being drawn that would allow Russia to keep much of the territory that it has occupied since the invasion 3 years ago. And they announced that, because this, I think, is going to be, it's 52-48 probably, but if there is anything to announce at the end of this meeting, that is what it will be. Where does that leave Ukraine and Europe? And if Ukraine refuse and say we will continue to fight, where does that leave her allies?
Well, that is the tricky move. If a deal appears to be done, then Ukraine says not good enough for us. Then they're on the back foot. Yeah. Europe, I think, is getting their act together slowly. But the peril of democracy is there's 27 nations have to agree, and one of them clearly doesn't. Hungary. Whereas Russia doesn't have to agree with anyone. And latterly, Donald Trump neither has to do that. So there is the democratic deficit that Europe needs to embolden itself, but it feels it has to take people with it.
Where do you derive your confidence that Europe is sort of getting its act together?
Well, France and Germany are stepping up. Let's be brutally honest that the smaller countries probably have to go along with some of that. So I'm hopeful that they'll get that in together.
And Zelensky, I mean, it's not going to happen by the end of next week, is it? And something that would be militarily significant, something that would deliver enough. That's the bit I don't think anybody knows. I don't know about you, but I've used the word queasy or nauseous to describe how I feel this morning about this meeting, because it's impossible to see the best possible outcome is nothing.
Yes, it is, and that's what we should hope for, because the 25%, nothing will happen, is really rather good for the world. It's rather bad for Donald Trump, but he's already set that up with his MAGA people there. So to manage,
it doesn't matter what actually happens, does it, in that context? Because he just announces to them that he's secured some extraordinary victory or pulled off some extraordinary achievement. Thank you, Peter. And thank you for the smile as well, actually. I mean, my condolences on the loss of your cat, obviously. Was it a long time ago, or is the memory still fresh?
It was stuffed, actually.
Okay.
In fact, not even stuffed. It was a toy cat.
Do you know whose father was a taxidermist in the current political pantheon, in the senior political figures of the moment in the United Kingdom? Do you know whose father was a taxidermist?
I'm afraid you've got me there. It could be Jacob Rees-Mogg.
His father was a ventriloquist. No, it was David Lammy. It's something that popped up in my full disclosure interview with him a couple of weeks ago. I didn't know. That's the power of research, isn't it? David Lammy's dad was actually a taxidermist. 26 minutes after 10 is the time. Thank you, Peter. The questions remain the same. What happens? I mean, is that true? That the best thing that can happen from a Ukrainian point of view, the best thing that can happen in Alaska today is nothing? Do you want to have a swing at the big stuff? And how historically significant is this moment? The two most powerful men in the world, probably, I mean, you can't rule China out of the equation altogether, but the two most powerful men in the world meeting to carve up a sovereign territory. You'd think Brexiters would be up in arms, but they're too busy cheerleading for Putin in a lot of cases, not all. Let me make that absolutely clear. Where Nigel leads, not everybody follows. But you would have thought that this assault upon sovereignty would really offend people who claimed to care passionately about sovereignty not that long ago. How significant a moment is it historically? 0345 60 60973 is the number you need. Stephen is in Pontefract. Stephen, what would you like to say?
History's going to judge this as absolute whitewash. Ukraine are not even at the table. How can a summit take place of a sovereign territory? It's flabbergasting the fact that Zelensky and the Ukrainian people are not represented. Europe, in answer to your question, what can they do? They're stepping up in the sense to give Ukraine and Zelensky a voice and give a balanced opinion against the White House and the Kremlin. The White House and the Kremlin, I don't even know what their role is, in the sense that the Kremlin is not prepared to budge. It wants Ukraine to concede land. The meetings in Anchorage, which is a win-win for Putin, is travelling 12 time zones, but is only miles away from the Russian border. And
his flight won't put him over any territory where he might have been threatened.
International arrest warrant.
International arrest warrant, or even missiles. I don't know. But here's the bit, Stephen, that I think we all miss. Maybe not you, but we are gaslit. I need a better word.
Absolutely.
It's the goldfish. It's the frog, isn't it? In the boiling pan of water. Because all of the things you've just listed, they would have set off every alarm bell in the world even 2 years ago. Never mind 5 years ago. But Ukraine aren't there. Putin asked for a meeting and it's happening on American soil. Trump has rolled out a red carpet. He's got his eye on things that would be to the benefit of the United States of America, whether it's minerals or beachfront properties. And when I say the United States of America, I mean Donald Trump. Sergei Lavrov, as far as I can tell, and I should double check this footage, but it appears to be accurate, has just turned up in Alaska wearing a USSR T-shirt or a CCCP T-shirt. Presumably, Donald Trump will give him a right old kicking for not wearing a suit. And as you list these things, the sense that something very precious and valuable has already been lost becomes irresistible.
I mean, the fact that Lavrov has just turned up in a CCP t-shirt, I mean, what does that say?
Well, it says it all.
It's just putting two fingers up at the White House. It's just putting two fingers up at the West. And nothing's going to come out of this that's going to benefit Ukraine. The only thing that's going to come out of this is going to benefit Trump and going to benefit Putin, whether it's transactional, whether it's mineral, whether it's sanction
vegetable,
release.
Animal, whatever. I think you're right. And of course, this simple question now that's popped up in the course of the first couple of calls, is the best thing that can happen for Ukraine nothing? 0345 606 0973. So to recap, how bad is this? I mean, listing there the things that are now, quotes, normal, end quotes, that would once have been truly extraordinary is an incredible experience, right? How big a victory has Putin already scored? How already secured? 0345 606 0973. And if the carve-up is completed, and for the record, I don't think it is the most likely outcome. I think and hope that the most likely outcome is nothing. What does Europe do? Where is Zelensky left by a carve-up, and where would his allies go next? 10:31 is the time. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:33 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I just picking up on one of the news stories there. I don't think John Healey is the first person to point out Nigel Farage's apologism for Vladimir Putin. I know Ed Davey has made the case very powerfully in recent years. I think Philip Hammond, when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, or shortly afterwards, did the same. Of course he's an apologist for Vladimir Putin. If someone punches you in the face and some mealy-mouthed little creep pops up to say you were asking for it, then that person is an apologist for the person who punched you in the face. Of course, that's not even a figure of speech when you're talking about Farage, because he ushered into Parliament somebody who'd been locked up for battering their own ex-girlfriend. Does he become an apologist for that kind of violence when he says this person has every right to be in Parliament? That perhaps is debatable. But are you an apologist for Vladimir Putin when you talk about having to expect the consequences when you poke the Russian bear? Not only are you historically ignorant, but of course you're an apologist for Vladimir Putin. It's extraordinary what is considered controversial in the current news climate, isn't it? Number one, of course, honest Bob Jenrick is xenophobic when he talks in incredibly scaremongering terms about asylum seekers. Of course, Nigel Farage is a Vladimir Putin apologist. This isn't debatable or questionable. He has literally done apologism in the same way that Jenrick has literally done xenophobia. What word are you going to use to describe someone doing xenophobia if not xenophobic? And of course, what word are you going to use to describe somebody doing Putin apologism? Never mind saying that he's the politician in the world I admire most, if not apologist. So here are three facts for you, all right? Robert Jenrick is xenophobic, Nigel Farage is a Putin apologist, and John Ketley is a weatherman. It's 10:35. David's in Belfast. David, what would you like to say?
Hey, James. Long-time listener, but usually I just rant in my car. Whereas today I've decided to lift the phone.
Go on.
I suppose whenever we're looking at Trump and Putin summit, I suppose a Northern Irish phrase that springs to mind is we either put up or shut up.
Yes. Is that an Irish phrase? I don't know that you get to cut. I think that's a fairly common phrase. Is it? I don't think it's unique to Ireland, but I'll let you have it.
We claim stuff that isn't ours all the time.
Sorry, just like Vladimir Putin, mate.
Oh, let's not go there.
Go on.
I suppose the interesting thing for me is we say if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, and it feels like part of Europe is on the menu, but actually, what are we doing to be at the table? We're giving half-hearted military support. We either need to go all in or say, look, you're a distant, faraway place, and that's part of life, which is Trump's approach. People in Ukraine aren't voting for Trump. Trump just wants the media today. He wants the highlights. He wants to look good. But actually, as Europe, we're going to lose something, and we're going to be on the menu because we half-heartedly supported Zelensky.
I don't know. I mean, this is the killer question, isn't it? That in the absence of troops on the ground, I don't know what else the West could have done. We may add that to the mixture of questions that we're asking today. What would wholehearted support have looked like?
Yeah, I think we sat back and we waited for the great America to turn up.
Do you think so?
the great America turned up with a long red tie, and we've went, oh, that's the wrong one.
And leadership. We were waiting for leadership from Biden or possibly...
We waited for the adults to turn up and stop, to use your analogy of getting punched by the big kid.
Yeah.
We waited for the teacher to turn up, and then it turned up that it was this substitute instead of the
I like
vice
this.
principal.
I want to explore this a little further because I like it because it fits some of the space created, but it doesn't tell us what leadership would have looked like, does it? It just, when we're waiting for someone to, and we don't know when we're waiting for the teacher to turn up and deal with the bully. We don't know how the teacher is going to deal with the bully. We just know that is the teacher's job, and we're going to jolly well wait until they do it. But do we know what leadership would have looked like? Do we know what an empowered Joe Biden or an elected Kamala Harris, or do we know what they would have done differently?
I think the sad reality is in American politics, the adult of the free world, it's not a great choice between the three. We needed assertive, we needed decisions, we needed this years ago, instead of allowing Putin to do this.
This is the point, though, isn't it? Because short of war, I don't know what that leadership looks like. I don't know what that alternative path looks like. Putin has to stop, right? How do you get him out of the 1/5 of Ukraine that he's now occupied? How do you get him out of there? You can't do it diplomatically, can you?
No.
So you're going to have to do it militarily. You do it militarily, you're at war. The United States is at war with Russia. The world is at war.
Yeah. And that's what he wants.
I don't know that he does, but I don't.
Well, he knows we won't blink. He knows that he can have a staring contest, and we will back down. Europe will back down every single time.
Well, militarily it might, and that's the difference between you and the first caller. The idea that Europe is somehow stepping up to the plate, but is it doing so quick enough? I mean, here's another question, David. Thank you. From the Ukrainian point of view. And this is a question I want you to answer, all right? Not David. Someone else can have a go. 0345 6060 973. From a Ukrainian point of view, what is the best thing that can happen in Alaska today? I think if you start chewing on that question, you will get the most powerful feeling yet of just how much jeopardy is in play at the moment. From a Ukrainian point of view, what is the best thing that can happen today? And I refer to Hamilton far too often, the musical Hamilton far too often, but that lyric, "In the room where it happens," I mean, it was brilliant when I first heard it, but goodness me, you suddenly realised what Lin-Manuel Miranda was nailing to the floor when he talked about in the room. You've got to be in the room where it happens. The room where it happens. And where is Volodymyr Zelensky, the only man to emerge from this hideous... well, no, that's not true, but the only man of the three leaders involved in this process to be admirable, to have any credit whatsoever, to be a true leader, to be brave, to be courageous. He's not there. He is not in the room where it happens. About us, but without us. Whew. David's in Cheltenham. David, what would you like to say?
I'd like to say that Trump has to deliver today, or we have to read the Riot Act to him if he doesn't deliver.
I don't know if he would understand the Riot Act if we rolled it into a cone and hit him over the head with it, David.
Why not? We could just ban him from the UK.
Well, that's never going to happen, is it?
Well, we need to do something. Europe needs to step up to the plate and say we respect the presidency, but we don't respect Trump.
Not the individual. He's due on a state visit next month, I think, or the month afterwards.
Yeah, we should withdraw that. He should not be the king. What on earth is the king going to say to him?
I mean, we need to, I suppose you're the first caller who has prompted me to say, well, I suppose we do need to wait and see what actually happens today. But what you've done is really pinned down what I was trying to convey when I talked about the vocabulary that we're deploying is wholly inadequate, and you've just reached for something out of the ordinary. But the scenario is out of the ordinary. So,
yes, it requires a different mindset.
Well, it's interesting that you see Trump as the pivot point rather than Putin. So I've been conducting this conversation.
We can't deal with Putin because we're causing a war.
Yeah.
But is America going to attack Britain? I don't think so.
No. So if they come out of that room with something that is to Vladimir Putin's satisfaction but not Volodymyr Zelensky's, Europe...
We've got to attack Trump.
Europe goes after Trump. I mean, I take in all all suggestions on the programme today, and I like yours on one level, but it just feels too implausible on another, doesn't it?
The whole world's implausible at the moment. Everything's implausible.
You can have that.
We've got to think like Trump and attack him on his own terms.
And make him look bad, even as he claims that he's pulled off some extraordinary act of international diplomacy. You've got to think like Trump. The whole world is implausible. Isn't that funny? David, thank you. You've just made me realise something. I sit here patting myself on the back for the acuity of my insights by saying, the vocabulary of analysis is unfit for purpose. We failed to recalibrate. And actually, you just recalibrated. You just said something that is an example of what a new vocabulary would look like, what a new analytic framework would look like, one that recognises the implausibility and absurdity of the big picture, and B, the individual depravity of the two characters involved, most obviously in your case, Trump. And my first reaction was to push back. I sit here criticising other journalists for not having come up with the new answers to the new questions, but I was part of the problem there in that moment. As soon as David said that, my first reaction was, no, don't be ridiculous, you can't do that. Maybe it's time to start contemplating what would previously have been ridiculous. VJ is in Colindale. VJ, what would you like to say?
Well, you have to put things in perspective. The war in Gaza, where public is fatigued. No one is willing to go to war. It's not the Spanish Civil War. No one wants to go to war. And Trump is winning because he's been able to pretend that he's going to bring peace. And that's what people want. People in America don't want to be involved in any more wars. Putin is winning because he's winning on the economic front.
It's not a great phone line, VJ. So just to clarify a couple of things, Putin wants to go to war. Volodymyr Zelensky wants to continue defending Ukraine against Putin's imperial ambitions. Whether or not the United States has an appetite for another war is moot. But public support for Ukraine in this country is still off the charts and would probably continue to be so if it became a military adventure. You only need to think back perhaps to the Falklands rather than Iraq, because that turned out to be unjustified. But you just think back to a justified war, public support for it historically is usually pretty high.
Yeah, but no one's willing to go fight.
Well, they would be, I think. I disagree.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, look at the recruitment in the army.
Yeah, but that's a very different thing. We have an army. There are problems with recruitment, but whether or not the public would support the deployment of our army in defence of Ukraine is the heart of the point that you're making. And we can disagree, but I really think that we would. I really think that the public would. I think you would see a sort of corollary to the support for the Ukrainian refugees that we displayed when the opportunity to invite them into this country was offered. Was created. I really do. I think that the sympathy for refugees and support for military action would be two sides of the same coin. I could be wrong. I don't know. Do I hope we never find out, or do I hope we do find out? That's part of the problem with this entire conversation, isn't it? And what does a meaningful resistance of Putin by Europe, by the rest of Europe, look like? We know what a meaningful resistance of Putin by Zelensky looks like. We've been watching it for 3 years. And that takes us back to the question that no one has wanted to answer yet. And it may be the most frightening question of all. From a Ukrainian point of view, what is the best thing that could happen today? 0345 60 60 973. It's 10:46.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 10:49, and I don't know, it feels a bit inappropriate to open up Idiot's Corner when we're having such a serious conversation, but you're pretty close, Ewan. Completely out of touch, James. Do you seriously believe that young people would be willing to head over to Ukraine and come back in a body bag for what is essentially a proxy war between the US and Russia? Get a grip. 3 things, pal. Soldiers have already joined the army. We're talking about the deployment of people who literally want to be soldiers. So that's head wobble number 1. Number 2, defending European territory against Russian aggression is the opposite of a proxy war between the US and Russia. It's a real war between Russia and Europe. And number 3, get a grip, to throw your own phrase back at you. And yes, I think we will open up Idiot's Corner. So make yourself comfortable and turn on the air conditioning. Rich is in Swindon on the, well, whatever questions. It's one of those topics, isn't it, where the questions multiply as the conversation continues. What made you pick up the phone, Rich?
Like the other gentleman from Northern Ireland, I think it was David, was it?
Yes.
More often than not, I just sort of like sit in the van and sort of cook off and rant endlessly. I just wanted to pick up on the point of what does it actually... How have we got to this situation with regard to the defence capability within the European powers, if you like?
Yes.
I can only draw on my own experience, obviously being of a certain age and sort of Cold War.
You're ex-military?
I am indeed, yeah. Okay. Nothing special, just an ordinary Joe.
That's special, if you'd allow me. No, it's today of all days, I'd like to say that is special. And thank you.
All right, well, thank you for that.
All right.
I just wanted to just take us back to the 1980s when we and our European allies, you know, the Bundeswehr, the Belgians, the Dutch, us, occupied. Obviously, we were still occupying Germany,
yes.
British Army of the Rhine. Now, that's a whole core strength, which is, you know, there were 4 divisions in Germany at that stage. A lot of stuff, and looking at. On listening to some of the comments that are coming in about capability, what does it actually look like if we were to go to war? Now, we've got a major problem, and the fundamental problem we've got is the whole of the British Army does not fill Wembley Stadium.
Yes.
That's, you know, the fighting strength of the British Army does not fill Wembley.
It doesn't mean we can't do anything with the army we have got.
No, but the actual capability that we've got.
The crucial phrase here. Sorry to interrupt you, but the crucial phrase here is without America, isn't it?
Indeed. We've all got that sort of comfort zone on. You know, peace dividend. Let's pare down to the absolute bare bones. I mean, literally, the British Army is effectively a cadre.
Mm.
That's what it amounts to now. So. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I don't think... basically, Zelensky and the Ukrainians are up the proverbial without a paddle.
And the paddle would once have been US-led Allied support. US-backed European boots on the ground as a deterrent initially, but then as a viable force. I mean, the Soviets didn't come because they knew they wouldn't be able to do it. And they're not in fine shape either as a military force compared to the years that you're referring back to. But the FT reported this week, I mentioned it earlier, that the military spending has tripled, and this is actual factories. You know, they were expanding at triple speed, and they measured the amount of ground being covered, 7 million square meters of new development. This is a historic level of rearmament, but would it be complete, and it does speak of a new world order in which Europe is once again required to defend its borders, or to be prepared to defend its borders. But will any of this happen quickly enough to help Ukraine?
It won't help Ukraine, but it'll probably help Poland.
So Germany's overtaken France in the last month, I think. That's it's gone up by 70% increase. German military expenditure, Rich. And you started with Germany in your memories. German military expenditure has gone up by 70%. But it's still not enough.
No, it's not. It's nowhere near enough. Nowhere near enough. I mean, you know, the country and the West in general, not just us.
Yeah.
You know, we've got to just switch on to the fact that we've got used to beating up little boys with big toys.
Or going into wars that we didn't think there was any prospect of losing. That's the same thing as what you're saying.
Exactly. You know, I used, when I talked to your producer or the lady,
she's both. You know, she's the producer and a lady.
Yeah. Sounds very nice. Incidentally, I've got your book.
Oh, good man. Thank you.
Yeah. It's a bit of a turnaround for me because I've come in from the cold from the other side, so to speak.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Thank you.
Well, you know, you live and learn, don't you?
That's the idea. So, I mean, in terms of the best thing, final question, what's the best thing that could happen from a Ukrainian point of view in Alaska today?
The best thing for Ukraine? Ooh, crikey. I think the best outcome for them, well, they're going to do. I mean, Crimea and the Donbass is done. I forget that.
Do you really think so?
Absolutely.
Well, Zelensky won't accept the Donbass.
No, but I can't see Putin withdrawing to.
Well, and then we're back to the idea that the best thing that can happen from Ukrainian perspectives is nothing. That things just carry on as they are, and I don't know what that clock looks like. Sorry, go on.
I think the worst thing that could happen is for a pseudo ceasefire.
Yeah.
In which the only thing that's going to happen is it's going to give Putin's forces chance to reorg and
come back harder next time. And Donald Trump will be playing the role of Neville Chamberlain and waving around a bit of paper that he claims is the greatest deal, the best deal, the most amazing, the deal that only I could get. They're eating the cats, they're eating that. And how likely is that? Seriously, hand on heart. Some of these historical parallels aren't perfect, but the idea that Donald Trump would do a lap of honour with a meaningless piece of paper given to him by Vladimir Putin is perhaps the most plausible parallel of all. Rich, stay safe. Mark is in Brighton. Mark, what would you like to say?
How you doing, James?
I'm good, Mark.
I'm good. I really think that the bottom line here is Trump sees this as business.
Yeah.
And because Putin has a chunk of the Donbass, guess who wants unfettered access to the mineral wealth of Donbass? Donald Trump. They don't need Europe. They don't need Zelensky. They don't need anybody. That's what they want. That Putin will give it to him. And therein will lie your ceasefire. I believe, and I hate to say this, I really do. I think Zelensky's going to have to abdicate. That's how bad it's going to get.
Because the alternative is, I mean, you mean as a form of, I don't want to use the word surrender, but admitting that the game is up almost.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because the game is very close to up. People need to count up the countries in Europe and ask themselves, how many countries in Europe really want to put their people on the ground to fight for Ukraine? And it's not that many. You think Spain or Portugal or Italy or Hungary or any of the rest of these European countries really want to send their troops to Ukraine? I don't think so.
Well, then they need to give their heads a wobble, because the point that Rich made, that possibly I glossed over a little bit too quickly, about it possibly is too late for Ukraine, but the 70% increase in military spending in Germany, which France is not far behind. We've obviously improved and increased ours. A sense of the three major powers in Europe rising to this challenge slowly, or rising to future challenges slowly, is irresistible. But that will help Poland and Finland, even Sweden. I mean, and you're right to perhaps to cite southern European countries as being among the most reluctant, but northern and eastern European countries would be in a completely different place when it came to...
And therein...
So Poland's military spending is 4.7% of GDP now.
And therein lies Donald Trump's victory lap. What has he been trying to get the Europeans to do? Increase their percentage of GDP.
Yeah,
and if those countries you just mentioned increase their spending, even if it's against a Russian adversary, Trump will say, I did it.
And that would be true.
Yeah, it would be true.
He's done it by essentially helping Putin put Europe into a vice, but he will claim it as a victory. And there is a horrible sense as this conversation continues, not just from you, but from almost all the callers today, that it's time is up for Ukraine.
Certainly the time is up for Donbass. I know that Zelensky says, I'm not giving up an inch, but the bottom line is Trump wants it, Putin has it, and Trump will do business with Putin regardless of what Zelensky wants. I mean, it's that simple.
Is it? And then Zelensky comes out and says no, and there's enough public support in Ukraine to continue resisting, which is what they're doing now, and nothing changes, and it isn't time up for Ukraine.
Well, no, nothing changes, but Putin keeps Donbass.
And there's not a lot they can do about it except have a kind of, not recognise that, not recognise the borders, not recognise the occupation, but live with it, accept it, but not recognise it.
Donald Trump says to Putin, I got a deal for you. In exchange for this access that I want to your minerals, to all of the different minerals in the Donbass,
10% of the world's lithium. I mean, well, I hope you're wrong, but I can't really argue with much of what you've said. I have one thought that runs through all of these contemplations, like Blackpool through a stick of rock, and Mark he's nibbled at the edges of it with the point about European military spending, and it did take the possibility of having a morally bankrupt American president who completely abandoned the post-war settlement and the post-war commitment to peace in Europe, because that's what we've got now. And that has acted as a catalyst for European military spending. But do you remember when certain people were absolutely adamant that the last thing we wanted was a European army? Where are those people now? People during Brexit campaigns kept talking about a European army as if it was something awful. What happened to them?
James O'Brien on LBC.
1:04 is the time. I think your wife's money is safe, V. I have bet my wife, writes V, £10 that you will be back for at least one day in the next 2 weeks. Something big always happens when you are away. It's become a bit of a millstone, that. I mean, there are days when it feels like nothing has happened. We looked it up, didn't we, a few weeks ago? Was it 1934? I've got the year 1934 stuck in my head when the newsreader went on the BBC and said, "Hello, here is the news. There is no news. Please enjoy some light piano music," or words to that effect. He was probably wearing a dinner suit. You know, it was a courtesy for the announcers, even on the radio, to wear full dinner suits back in the day. So some days it does feel like there are fewer stories around than others. And it does sometimes feel like I go on holiday and things go off. You should be safe in August, safer than you are in the rest of the year. But I don't know that it is quite the guarantee that it seems to have turned into in many of our minds. The only time I came back when I had a day off was, I think, the Barnard Castle story, wasn't it? I think I was due off to take that whole week off, and Dominic Cummings claimed that he'd driven his wife and young son miles around the northeast because he needed to test his eyesight without driving even further, in direct contravention of the lockdown rules that he had helped introduce. And it just seemed such an egregious lie. And it was lockdown. So I was stuck in my shed, you see. I'm sure if I'd actually been on holiday, I wouldn't have picked up the phone to the boss and said, "Any chance I can come back on air tomorrow? Any chance I can come back on it? Can you squeeze me in tomorrow?" So I don't think your £10 is safe there, V. I'm terribly sorry. Also, I don't think Mrs. O'Brien would have something to say. Never mind Mrs. V. Mrs. O'Brien would have something to say about me bailing on my imminent holiday to comment on. And also, I've got a brilliant holiday cover as well, you know. And they're more than capable of stepping up to the plate and doing a bang-up job. 6 minutes after 11 is the time. I'm staying with this for reasons that I'm sure that you'll understand. I'm keeping one question on the board. And that question is this: what is the best thing that can happen from a Ukrainian point of view? John Healey there, the Defence Secretary, sounding surprisingly upbeat about the prospects of something that would be in the Ukrainian interests. I'm less optimistic. But I want to do this now, and it's something that Mark said that made me think this. I've got terrible geography. I didn't even do a GCSE in geography. I have to check things all the time. So when he talked about Spain and Portugal, in my head, I was thinking, but they're the sort of southernmost European countries, aren't they? The tip of Spain is even further south than the tip of the Peloponnese. And I had to, I'm embarrassed to admit, I had to just double check. And you talk about Spain and Portugal being reluctant to get involved in a military engagement in Northern Europe. You're probably right. I don't know enough about either country to say that with certainty. But if you look at a European map and you remember that Belarus is essentially a satellite of the Kremlin, but the rest of it is up for grabs. Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine, and I'm looking at the southern border of Russia now, not the eastern border, about which I know even less. You know, you only have to hop through Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to get into Afghanistan. But if you look at where Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania are, you look at where Finland is, you look at the ease with which you could cross Finland into even Sweden. You remember Donald Trump's ambitions regarding Greenland. This is where you might think I'm taking leave of my senses, okay? you look at where Poland is. You don't need much history to know where Poland sits historically in these kinds of moments. And then you've got Moldova, tiny little country between Ukraine and Romania. And then you get the exactly the same territories that were carved up the last time the Russian leader and the American leader sat down to discuss the future of Europe. You've got your Slovakias, your Czechias, your Hungaries, your Austrias, Serbias. And this is where I hope you will think that I have taken leave of my senses. Because Donald Trump, particularly with his comments about Greenland, sometimes has the air of a man who thinks he can help himself to whatever he wants. How many people just thought of what Nigel Farage describes as locker room talk in that moment there when Donald Trump was recorded on tape discussing his attitude to women, who he thinks that by dint of his celebrity and his status, he is free to grab by the genitalia whenever he should so desire. What if he has the same attitude to sovereign territories in Europe? Listen, absolute, not pie in the sky, but you come up with a better explanation as to why he is sitting down with Putin today in the way that he is sitting down with Putin. So Mark posited the possibility of Ukrainian assets being on the table. I don't think that's even close to fanciful. Ukrainian assets for Putin, but also, of course, by dint of the, quotes, deal, end quotes, that they may do, they would be assets upon which the United States of America had first dibs. 10% of the world's lithium. The two biggest deposits currently in Russian-occupied parts of Ukraine. And US industry needs this stuff, these rare earth minerals that are going to become something we talk about and come to understand a lot more in the coming years. So who honestly thinks Putin would stop with whatever is agreed in Alaska today? And what I want to do now, so I'm leaving on the board the question of what the best outcome for Ukraine is, but I do wonder whether anyone's actually able to answer that question or whether there's any answer to it that is different from the one I've provided, namely, nothing. The best possible outcome for Ukraine today is nothing. John Healey would disagree. He seems to think there is a ceasefire, a feasible ceasefire, and he's the Defence Secretary, so he knows more about this stuff than I do. There is a feasible and achievable ceasefire that would be good news for Ukraine. I disagree at the moment, but only time will tell. And what I want to do now is shift the focus entirely to Eastern and Northern Europe. So I want to know what this conversation sounds like at the moment in Finland, in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine, I suppose, but that's a slightly different proposition. Poland, particularly. This idea that the stakes are really, really high. Sitting in London, in the United Kingdom, just about getting my head around the notion of how high the stakes are. But what do Finns, Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians, Poles feel about this moment where Ukraine is 20% occupied by Russia and the leader of the free world is a lot more sympathetic to the leader of Russia than he is to the leader of Ukraine? The leader of the, quotes, free world, end quotes, has switched sides. How does that play to people who have got family, skin in the game, if you like, in the countries that are bordering Russia or bordering Ukraine? Because Moldova would be next under this reading of the Russian juggernaut. Okay, so it's 12 minutes after 11. It's a change, similar territory, but a complete change of focus, that's all. I want to know what you... Because this is partly inspired by Thomas, who's Polish but lives in Worcester and was one of the first callers on yesterday or the day before when we got stuck into this subject. And the analysis from somebody, A, fully cognizant of Polish history, but B, fully cognizant of Polish positions today, was absolutely fascinating and deeply illuminating. And the same will be true in Finland. The same will be true in Estonia, Latvia, all of Scandinavia, and the Baltic states. What is the conversation there? I mean, what is the feeling there? So we'll ask the same questions, but I want to confine the answers to people with knowledge of or living in those countries in a way, or having family, people from those countries. How different does this conflict look? And crucially, how different does this summit look to people who are in Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, or the rest of Scandinavia? I'll include Ukraine, but it's a bit different because Ukraine has already been invaded. How does it look to the residents or the citizens of the countries that could be next? That's what I want to know, okay? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And don't hold back, because I know nothing, all right? To paraphrase Manuel out of Fawlty Towers, just to continue the Spanish theme with which we began this introduction, I know nothing. And I promise you we need help in this country understanding how different this view looks from these places, from Finland, from Estonia, from Latvia, from Lithuania, from Poland, from Moldova, from some of these other places, some of these other countries. We talk about it and we're quite well informed and we have the benefit of some brilliant guests and contributors, but it doesn't feel as if we're in personal danger. Does it feel as if Putin poses a proper threat, a proper danger to countries beyond Ukraine? And if it does, what are your feelings about the meeting in Alaska today? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. If you hit those numbers now, you will get through. Okay? It's 11:15.
James O'Brien on LBC.
16 is the time. I should have a little bit of light relief as well while we continue to contemplate the possibility of World War III. This isn't really a missing word round, but I'm going to pretend that it is. This headline almost made me spit out my cornflakes this morning. This is absolutely extraordinary, and no one is going to guess this correctly, okay? So we're talking about, just to give you a little bit of background, we're talking about an 18-year-old girl, okay? An 18-year-old girl in London. Teenager with higher IQ than Hawking has blank A-levels. How many A-levels do you think this 18-year-old girl has secured in the last year or two? Okay, so one student. And I'll tell you, and you will not believe me, and no one will guess it correctly. But anyway, we concern ourselves next with the question about what might be next on the menu, what might be next for Vladimir Putin, and of course the question of what on earth would be a positive outcome, a good outcome, a feasible, desirable outcome for Ukraine in today's meeting in Alaska. Let's go to Mark, who's in Mill Hill. Mark, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
Yes, the problem isn't just what's next on the menu for Putin. It's also what's on the menu for Trump.
Yeah.
And the answer to that is the emasculation of Europe, both the European Union, but also Greater Europe. Putin wants to damage Europe and fragment it by stopping expansion of the EU and NATO to the east, and Trump, who is on record as saying that the EU was only formed to
frustrate Americans' interests, yes.
damage the interests of the United States. He wants to emasculate Europe so that it is more of it has to lean more on Washington for military support, political support, and economic support.
I used the word normalcy a lot about 3 months ago, and our inability to adapt to the profoundly abnormal. You've gone there. You've done it really well. The idea that Trump does look at European countries in the same way that he looks at women, almost. He can help himself to whatever he wants. When he shared that footage of like a reimagined Gaza with a big Trump Tower in the middle of it, and we didn't know whether to snigger, sneer, or reel in shock and horror. But that is how his mind works. He's atavistic. He's avaricious. He sort of thinks, what's in it for me? And he would think that even about European soil. He'd think that about European minerals and assets. I mean, he's not going to, and he thinks he's thought it about Greenland as well. But it's still a little bit hard to accept that he might be there today in Alaska with a shopping list.
I'm sorry, I don't quite get what you mean.
Well, do you think he has designs on things that are currently European?
I think it's just a long-term strategic plan to reverse what is obviously seen as a mistake of the Eisenhower government.
But that's a withdrawal from the European. It's not a co-option. You don't think that he actually wants to get his hands on rare earth deposits or Greenland's minerals or whatever that may be. That bit of it.
Certainly the Greenland thing is obviously smart, particularly since Greenland, Denmark and Canada have come to an arrangement. So that obviously has annoyed him.
Yeah.
But the long-term thing, not just for Trump, but for the entire sort of Russian-influenced think tanks of the Beltway, is to emasculate Europe so that it is no longer a competitor to the United States.
And you see this alongside sort of tariffs and alongside some of the other policies that he's introduced, never mind the rhetoric, and it becomes hard to resist. It's an alternative, though, which is what I was trying to pin down to the sort of transactional, there to do a deal, there to fill his pockets. I mean, they could coexist. Two things can be true at the same time, but it's the difference between simple withdrawal of support and a desire to deliberately and measurably weaken or emasculate Europe. Again, I find myself thinking of the European army. It's weird how it keeps popping up. If you were Vladimir Putin, what would you want a political figure in the United Kingdom to have been doing in the first 15 years of this century? If you're Vladimir Putin, you've got imperial ambitions. You have got a desire to invade sovereign states that used to be part of the USSR. What would be the single most powerful and valuable thing a UK political figure could do? Yeah, exactly. To create a negative notion of a European army, to poo-poo the notion of a European army. I said to you years ago, I've always thought, and I'm no expert, that the armies you should be worried about are the ones that you're not in. Never understood why Farage, and it was pretty much only him, I don't really remember many other figures being quite so outspoken about the negative prospect of a European army. My God, what would the difference be if we had a European army now? A proper European army that sat in distinct difference from NATO. But if you were Vladimir Putin and you had a UK politician in your pocket, or you had someone who was going beyond being a mere apologist and was actually advancing your interests in public discourse, what approach would you want him to take to the notion of a European army? You'd want him to be absolutely adamant that it was a really, really bad thing, wouldn't you? In fact, I can't think of two people who would benefit more from the depiction of a European army as a bad thing. I can't think of two people more than Vladimir Putin and Sergei Lavrov. Extraordinary. So why on earth was Nigel Farage doing that for them all those years ago? Perhaps someone could ask him. It's 24 minutes after 11. Thank you, Mark. Charlie is in Amsterdam. Charlie, what would you like to say?
Thank you, James. Great to talk to you. In answer to your question about what this looks like in Scandinavia and the Baltics and what they're doing differently,
yes.
What really makes them stand out is that they have what we call a very comprehensive whole-of-society approach to their security, because they have a very recent history, particularly the case of the Baltics, yes, of occupation for decades. And this goes down even into the school system. In Estonian schools, they learn the foundations of military strategy, and they learn about guerrilla warfare enacted by partisans, the Forest Brothers, during Soviet occupation. Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you were pausing for effect then, because I was sort of gulping. That's an extraordinary thing to be to be taught. First of all, how do you know so much about this, if you don't mind me asking?
So I'm a journalist with the Moscow Times, which is an exiled news organization. We were founded in the 1990s to provide high-quality English language news for all the expats who came to Russia as a newly emerging market. We had to leave Russia in 2022 because, well, we wanted to call the war a war. And you can't call it a war in Russia. You have to call it a special military operation.
Good Lord.
So both our English and Russian language services, along with several other independent Russian outlets, have been operating in exile in Amsterdam since, and we've been declared undesirable by the Russian government.
Congratulations.
Which means, it's a strange situation because, on the one hand, it is something of a badge of honour. It does mean
but it limits what you
properly.
can do. It limits your ability to do your job as well.
Exactly. It makes it illegal for sources in Russia to talk to us.
Wow.
Thankfully, they still do. But, I mean, in previous journalism jobs I've had, we were very rigorous about how you have to be able to put people's names on quotes, for example. We can't do that anymore because we're putting them at risk. And for Brits like me, it's just it's an annoyance. But for my Russian colleagues, it's very sad.
Yes.
And they're worried about their families.
Well, I'll pick your brains if I may while I have you, Charlie. Thank you for ringing in today. I mean, let's begin with that question. What is the... can you speak about Russian public opinion? Is it a vaguely homogenous thing? And if so, what is it?
So it's very hard to tell, firstly, because people are very reluctant to respond to surveys, even the relatively high-quality one. Generally, it is a minority of people who are full-on cheerleaders for the war, we might say. The patriots is the phrase I sometimes use. But equally, the number of people who are actively opposed to it is quite a small minority.
Okay.
In a lot of cases, it's a sort of resignation. And very few people want the war to actively continue. But ending a war and losing a war are very different things.
And, I mean, given what you just told us about Estonia and other countries and the attitude that they have, the conversation about the war in general and about the summit in Alaska today is going to be incredibly different in the countries that I've listed than it is, for example, in the United Kingdom. Are there any sort of defining themes of that conversation? Do Estonians and Lithuanians and other and Latvians and the rest of them, do they feel that Putin has designs upon their territory, on their countries?
I haven't been monitoring over the past few days, but more generally...
I mean more generally. I mean, because historically, you can talk about Russian ambition, but specific to Putin, the idea that he comes away with something he wanted from Donald Trump, the fear that he will now want more, is likely to be more keenly felt in the countries that we're talking about than it is in the UK, no?
Precisely, and it's a very real risk. These are very small countries. They don't have much strategic depth. In theory, Russia could get to Tallinn within a day or so.
Yes.
However, they know this, and that is why we have the Joint Expeditionary Force based there, which is a military body outside of NATO who can respond quickly in the case of invasion, and NATO itself is beefing up its presence in the area. But there's a cultural level to it too. If you go to any of these cities, you will see anti-Russian graffiti absolutely everywhere. I remember not too long ago, I was in Tallinn, the capital of Estonia, and I was visiting their memorial park. And on a memorial to people who had died under communist rule, there was graffiti saying, "Russian occupiers make the best soap and fertilizer."
Blimey. And that is, I mean, partly because the memory of occupation is still generationally fresh, and it, as you say, it's part of the cultural furniture. So these conversations that we have in London, and I'm delighted you were listening today, that are a little bit theoretical, and sometimes we guard ourselves against fears of hyperbole. In these 10 countries, and UK is part of the Joint Expeditionary Force as well. I wonder how many people listening to this programme at the moment know that. But Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, and then the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden and the UK. This exists, and the cultural legacy is that Russian invasion is a constant threat, an existential threat.
Precisely, and the politicians know that. Interestingly, there was a great article in the Washington Post recently about the Finnish president Alexander Stubb, who has a very good relationship with Donald Trump, in part based on playing golf, which makes him almost a bit of a Trump whisperer. People I've spoken to in Washington, even among all the uncertainty about the strength of Trump's commitment to Europe, the extent to which that is rhetoric or a general threat, say that actually the Baltic states have a lot of resonance within American politics and a lot of sympathy, because a lot of particularly Republicans not only respect them for shaking off communist rule and becoming pretty successful countries, actually, but also for the fact a lot of them took a hard neoliberal turn in the 1990s. So they feel a degree of kinship there. And also, these are the countries that have taken their defence and their defence spending seriously. So they aren't arguably freeloaders like so many countries in southern and western Europe have been.
Thank you. I knew that this was almost, if I had assembled in a laboratory, the kind of call I wanted when I set up this second hour of the programme. It would have been the call that you've just made. Because
thank you. I can recommend a book for your readers as well.
Please do.
So there was a great book released recently called Baltic, The Future of Europe by Oliver Moody, where he goes through Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and Poland, and he talks about this culture I'm talking about. In Lithuania, you can sign up to courses which will teach you what to do in the event of a Russian invasion. And a lot of those lessons are brought straight from Ukraine. There are actually booklets online in English that you can find about this. And it includes what I find to be really interesting details, like if it is safe, film what is going on, looking at identifying markers, and then try and send those to particularly the BBC and CNN, because so much of the information that we got in the early days of the invasion of Ukraine were from just civilians filming what was going on in the streets.
Absolutely.
But of course, do that safely, because the Russians will be looking for anybody who is trying to collect any of that kind of intelligence.
Can I share your byline, Charlie? Do you mind? Because I want to encourage people to follow your work and the work of your colleagues at the Moscow Times as well.
Please do.
Good. Charlie Hancock, thank you so much for that. And keep on doing what you're doing. Absolutely fascinating. And I wonder how many people, as a consequence of Charlie's call, Charlie Hancock of the Moscow Times, are going to be on a crash course now about the Joint Expeditionary Force. I know I am. It's funny, isn't it, that popped up just as I was wondering why we allowed anybody ever to paint the notion of a European army as being an undesirable or being a bad thing. Here you have a coalition of 10 like-minded nations: Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden and the UK, comprising high-readiness forces configured to respond rapidly to crises. I mean, unless you were literally, well, not literally, but unless you were metaphorically in danger of disappearing up Vladimir Putin's backside, why on earth would you be opposed to either a European army or, it must be asked now, a joint expeditionary force configured to respond rapidly to crises most likely to be caused by the current Kremlin incumbent? Every day is a school day, isn't it? And today, of course, is the 80th anniversary of VJ Day as well. And I'm going to speak to Dan Snow, the history guy, about that after the very latest headlines with Thomas Watts.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:37. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we have been conducting a conversation about the imminent summit between Presidents Trump and Putin, but I want to take a step back now, a step back in time indeed. It is today the 80th anniversary of victory over Japan in World War II. It struck us together, didn't it, some years ago that we were, all being well and God willing, we were going to be alive when the last survivors of the Second World War passed away, that there would be nobody left in our time to provide first-hand accounts of what happened in their time. It's a statement of the bleeding obvious on the one hand, but it's a poignant thought on another, and an 80th anniversary is a very timely reminder of that passage of time. I'm delighted to be joined by Dan Snow, the historian and broadcaster whose History Hit podcast is a absolute game changer and available on Global Player. And Dan joins me now. Hey, VJ Day, Dan, as a historian, what are the things that you wish more of us knew and appreciated about that moment?
Well, James, it's a great question, and the answer is, I wish more of us could know and appreciate the horror, the barbarity, the monstrous nature of war, especially that war in the Pacific, especially that war in the last few months of that war in the Pacific, the fighting on, the horrific fighting on Okinawa, the biggest battle the Pacific War fought in the last few weeks and months of the war through the summer of 1945, the monstrous, enormous aerial bombardment of Japanese cities that torched entire cities, killed more than 100,000 people in one night, Tokyo, and of course the atomic strikes which laid waste to entire cities, gave human beings just simply unimaginable destructive potential, the trauma, the lingering effects, the generational, and that's why when people who haven't lived through those things, haven't experienced them directly, sort of talk about war, and wouldn't it be a good idea to, we should do and invade that, and we should reconstitute this, and that French presidential candidate said, I think Northern Italy should be part of France. Just that language. If you know about history, if you've talked to survivors of those last months of World War II, if you talk to people that have seen the face of war, that's monstrous. Donald Trump talking about, even sort of half joking about Greenland, about Panama, or about Canada. It's monstrous. It's monstrous, and I think that's what we have no idea how lucky we are in our generation. No idea, and so if you want to remember, if you want to pay your respects to those veterans, it's never ever let your children, their children, a future generation have to experience what they did.
Wow. And of course, it's implicit in what you say, the further from the moment that we move, the harder it is to appreciate the luck of our own times and the luck of our own generation. Why do you think that the Pacific, the events in the Pacific, which outlasted the events in Europe, have been so overshadowed in the collective memory in this country in the ensuing decades?
Well, it's understandable on one level, isn't it? The war in Europe took place on our doorstep, literally in towns and villages and cities across the UK. Buildings were destroyed, people were made homeless. All of us have got stories about the Blitz and about relatives and family members who experienced that, streets and town centres that were our own beloved neighbourhoods and communities that were fundamentally transformed by the effect of the bombing and the reconstruction and after. So on one level, it's understandable. It's a lot to ask people to hold all these different theatres of war in their heads, and they find the theatre that took, that D-Day, the troops leaving Southampton, the Solent and Plymouth and in Portsmouth. It's not that surprising that sort of has eclipsed the terrible fighting in the Far East, I think. And so it is a lot to ask people but it's important to say there was also enormous warfare going on across gigantic swathes of the Earth's surface, on the sea, below the sea, on islands, volcanic scraps of land, jungles of Burma where British troops were fighting alongside their Indian and Nigerian and Commonwealth allies fighting in extraordinary conditions. So it is important that we remember that too.
And as we sort of acknowledge all day, really, and we'll be marking the 2-minute silence at 12 noon today. The memories fade, memories disappear into the distance. What doesn't really, partly perhaps because of the film that was released recently, is the atomic bomb and the role that those strikes played. Do we talk about moral justification Or is it a given that needed to be done?
Yeah, there's in my geeky corner of the world, there's endless debates about moral justification and about military justification. There's all sorts of discussions that take place, and there was that debate began the minute the crews landed, and people connected with the bomb, people connected with the dropping of the bomb. Everyone has over the years chimed in and took part in that discussion. It's a very, very difficult one, isn't it? And the fact that there is a suggestion that the Americans were keen to drop the bomb to demonstrate to Stalin that Stalin should not try and extend his enormous conquests both in Asia and in Europe. There's a huge amount of politics around the dropping of that bomb, and other people argue that it's a shame they couldn't have dropped the bomb over the sea or in an uninhabited place where the Japanese could have seen its destructive potential. At the time, and certainly when you talk to veterans, they regard that dropping that bomb as having saved lives, because the invasion of the Japanese homelands would have been, again, you run out of superlatives, but every Japanese teenager was being trained to use sharpened bamboo sticks to carry out suicide attacks on the D-Day invasion when it would have happened on the Japanese homelands. There would have been horrific casualties, and the lion's share of those would probably have fallen on the Japanese people. So these are kind of debates that go on, and I hope they do go on. But your point is true, is that as the whole point of history, the whole point of and modern archiving, the wonderful thing about interviews and oral history in museums is it stops us being like goldfish in a bowl, just each new generation going, I tell you what would be a good idea, why don't we, it'll be easy, war, it'll be quick, it'll be cheap, and there'll be certain outcome, there'll be loads of upside, and actually through much of human history that has been the case. Every generation's just marched off to make the same mistakes, and the reason I'm doing history, and at the risk of sounding like too pompous, is we're all playing a small part in trying to get people to understand that we can maintain the horror and the outrage that the dropping of the nuclear bomb or the firebombing of Dresden or the mass casualties inflicted by the Germans in Russia in the Holocaust, we can maintain that sense of immediacy and terror without having to go through the horror of living through it ourselves. So we can, if you like, keep learning the lessons long after those who've witnessed them have passed on.
And I'm going to put you on the spot a bit now, for which I apologise, because you join us in the middle of a conversation that has touched upon the prospect of war returning. Well, it has returned to European soil, of course, and the notion of escalation is very much in the wind today as this summit in Alaska unfolds. Some commentators suggesting that Putin dreams of a second Yalta, where Trump, Xi and him sort of carve up the world into spheres of influence. What can history teach us about this moment? What do you fear when you see these two out of three of the biggest leaders in the world sitting down to discuss the fate of countries who aren't in the room where the conversation's taking place?
It's obviously it's deeply depressing. That's the kind of politics that we dreamt and hoped that we might have left behind in this bright new modern world that we built in the second half of the 20th century. And it's the world that, growing up and when you and I were in our early, the 90s, there was problems in the world, but there was a sense, my gosh, we might be able to move forward to this place where conflict is resolved through the UN by talking. We might be able to move to a place where we can slash these defence budgets and invest in early years education and healthcare and try to protect the environment and roll back the effects of climate. That world is deeply depressingly seems to have slipped away now, and it would be extraordinary, wouldn't it? It's on the actual 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, the post-war era almost comes to a close as well. So this era where, despite superpower rivalry and all sorts of flashpoints around the world and plenty of war, sadly, but actually a kind of understanding that gigantic interstate warfare was such a terrible idea that no one would really win from. And if Vladimir Putin succeeds in carving off a chunk of Ukraine because of the military pressure he brought to bear, i.e., if its normal service resumed, if it's like it was in the 19th, the 18th century, we'll take that province, mate. Yeah, we won that last battle, all right, I'll give you that province, you can have that one back. That's a world in which there is no security, there's no future, there's no peace. We might live in peace for a bit, but long term it means that we haven't solved this fundamental problem of our willingness to march off on the instructions of some old man and fight and kill and maim and steal in other people's territories. That implies that is normal service resumed, and that would be, well, it would be existential, it would be awful.
You're so good at what you do, Dan. It's a real pleasure to have you on the programme today. I know that's not an entirely appropriate word when we're discussing such poignant matters, but it's the only one I can think of. Thank you.
Means a lot, man. Thank you very much indeed.
Dan Snow there, the host of the History Hit podcast, which is an absolute masterpiece of the genre and is also available on Global Player. Judging by my inbox, picked up a few new subscribers as well. But the effortlessness with which he tied together the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War and the urgency, the existential urgency of the situation that the world finds itself in today, with that neat distillation of the meeting in Alaska today. I think that was actually just a privilege to listen to, wasn't it? It's 11:48.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10 to 12 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. In about 8 minutes' time, we will be marking the 80th anniversary of VJ Day, of the end of the Second World War. So do prepare yourselves for that. It occurred to me, listening to Dan Snow, who clearly impressed you every bit as much as he impressed me, that it isn't just people who... And indeed, talking to Charlie Hancock from the Moscow Times, who rang us from Amsterdam, it's not, of course, just people with, quotes, it's a dreadful phrase, but it's the only one... No, a dog in the race or skin in the game, that are going to have a proper understanding of how Putin's current success, and I hate to use that word, but it fits, I'm afraid, will feel in countries like Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia, or Finland. Historians and decent journalists will have the ability to see that big picture as well, indeed to paint that big picture as well. And I felt that Charlie and Dan have done so brilliantly, particularly in the context of something very precious slipping out of our grasp as the distance between now and the end of the Second World War lengthens and grows. I just wanted to mention that because I am still very interested in how the conversations that we had in the first hour of the programme, in a very Western Europe-centric or indeed a very London or UK-centric way, would be conducted in countries where that existential threat to peace or that existential threat to stability and security posed by Vladimir Putin is felt so much more keenly. So we will go now to Helsinki, where Jussi has phoned from. Jussi, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
I just wanted to say Finland is hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. That's what I'd say.
What does that mean? I mean, and talk me through when that position changes, because you can always hope for the best and fear the worst, but why would the fear of the worst have grown in recent years or months?
Well, it's kind of always been there. Finland became independent in 1917 and obviously was fighting Soviet Union in the Second World War. There's the Winter War and continuation of war. Three out of four of my grandparents were actually on the front lines, including my grandmother, who was evacuated from Cariad. So it's very much in the Finnish sort of spirit and penetrates the whole society. And even now in Helsinki, I'm just like under 400 kilometers from St. Petersburg. So it doesn't. This
is the thing I think we struggle to understand on my side of Europe, on our side of Europe, is that even with the sort of Glasnost and Gorbachev eras notwithstanding, the acquisitiveness or the deep Russian desire to return to the time of the Tsars or to push these borders ever forward, it never goes away, whether you're inside Russia or whether you're in the target zone in as Finland is. It never goes away.
That's true. Finland has been part of Russia and part of Sweden and part of Russia and then independent. And basically the whole society is structured based on the idea that someday Russia might attack.
Wow.
I would say that.
Wow. What from a Finnish point of view? Well, it's probably the same as a Ukrainian point of view. What's the best thing that could happen in Alaska today?
Well, I wouldn't probably put too much hope on it because I consider Trump to be a Putin asset, really.
Yeah.
And I think the best case obviously would be for Russia to pull out of Ukraine and just no territory to be ceded. They can't win. They can't be encouraged that they can move borders by force. But I don't know, not being too hopeful about today.
It can be the opposite, couldn't it? So the best case scenario is that nothing would change, nothing would happen, because the alternative is for Putin to essentially be given a very, very strong message that what he has done has worked. And if it worked in the context of Ukraine or in the context of the parts that he has occupied, then it will work elsewhere as well. Can I ask how old you are, Jussi?
47.
So we're similar age. Is this the most concerned you felt in your lifetime about the actions on elsewhere in your parts of Europe, or was it acute when you were younger, and then we had a few years off when the Cold War ended, and now it's just come back again like it was before?
Well, I never considered it to be a huge practical threat, and I don't think most Finnish people feel there's an imminent threat right now. But funnily enough, about 20 years ago, I was in Ukraine, in Crimea. It was part of Ukraine still, and I was in the what's it called, the city where they got all these military bases, and I was just standing there, and they had rented part of it to Russia, and I was just thinking, there's like Ukrainian ships on my left and Russian ships on my right, and Ukraine had just announced they want to become a NATO member, and I was just thinking to myself, am I actually standing in the hotspot where this Third World War starts? And can't help but to kind of remember that.
No, I bet you can't. That's right. I mean, that sent shivers down my spine. Jussi, thank you. Jussi, I've said your name wrong throughout the course of that conversation, for which I apologise. No, I won't do it next time, I promise, Jussi. And I suspect that we will talk again, because these perspectives are really important. I should have been seeking them sooner, shouldn't I, really? The idea that the nucleus, if you like, of what we're talking about is going to be, it's going to look different according to how near you are to it. And you can't get much nearer than you see. That comment about how far away St. Petersburg is was particularly chilling. Lots of you getting in touch, including some of you not taking events terribly seriously. Wouter says, he's 47, James. That's not a similar age to yours. Well, it's more similar than 46, Wouter, isn't it? Honestly, everyone's a critic. And a couple of texts now about the current situation in Europe before we mark the end of World War II in the Far East. He hasn't won a victory, writes Gary. Trump has just gifted him everything that he desired. It isn't a case of whether or not Europe can step up to continue to exist. Europe simply has to, and it has to step up hard and fast. Clive writes, no matter what these two dictators agree, if it means Ukraine ceding territory, then the Ukrainians will not accept and will keep on fighting with Europe's help, and perhaps stick two fingers up at the USA. And quite a few people picked me up on that comment earlier about Sergei Lavrov wearing a T-shirt that said CCCP on it. Of course, it's the Cyrillic script, and it does actually say SSSR. My apologies for that, particularly as I'm off to Greece this weekend, where everything will be in, not a Cyrillic script, but certainly not in the alphabet that we're familiar with. And finally, on a much lighter note, you've said unprecedented, writes Elise, an unprecedented number of times recently. Perhaps we need to start expecting the unprecedented events instead of normality.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 12. I'd take a moment just to address, some people have asked politely, some people less so. The reason why we have background noise when we're observing a 2-minute silence is pretty straightforward. And it's because the way radio is designed, if there is actual silence, then emergency tapes kick in. Because, and you can't turn that off. That's the nature of the medium. It's the nature of the technology. A massive majority of people supremely untroubled by it. But I register that a couple of people seem to be genuinely confused, and I hope that confusion has now been allayed. 5 minutes after 12 is the time. And while I'm doing housework, as it were, a quick shout to Adam and a quick thank you. Adam dropped some cakes and brownies off yesterday. I was going to say drop them off for the team who are currently munching their way through them, but he actually dropped them off for me. And I have chosen to share them because that's the kind of guy that I am. So thank you for that, Adam, and thank you for your lovely message as well. What is the most snobbish opinion you hold, do you think? Mum used to always tell us not to drink from cans in the street or not to eat food in the street. I always thought that was daft. And who obeys that now? Greggs would be out of business in a hot minute, wouldn't it, if we were told to be worried about eating in the street? But Mum used to really hit that one home. What's the most snobbish thing I've said recently? I probably shouldn't reveal this live on air, but I'm going to. Most snobbish thing I said recently was that I can usually tell, and I want to make something absolutely clear. I'm talking about people in my line of work, people in the business of being paid for their opinions, right? I can usually tell when one didn't go to university. How much do you hate me now? Just in my line of work, I want to make that absolutely clear. I can usually tell when one didn't go to university. And the reason for that is I am describing an intelligent person who hasn't really learned the value of being wrong or of critical thinking. Somebody who is intelligent and articulate, but who has never quite discovered how to use the fourth and fifth gears of their own intellect. Incredible. Is that snobbish? I don't know. I think it's pretty... God, quite a few people are actually taking me at my... I was once of the opinion... God, this is really funny, actually. What is the most snobbish opinion that you hold? It's like one of those confession websites, isn't it? Let me get a couple up there. I like this. James writes, I was once of the opinion that women shouldn't drink pints. Matt, staying on the libation theme, says, I only drink Twining's breakfast tea. That's not snobbish. You might just prefer the taste. But my snobbishness was on full display earlier this week when I was discussing a certain newspaper columnist, and I said, I bet you 50 quid they didn't go to university, because I think I can tell from a mile away. When you have that, you've got the intelligence and the articulacy, but you haven't got the depth of knowledge. You haven't got the desire to understand things better. It's as if you reach a point of pungent opinion and then you just relax and defend it furiously for the rest of your life. I'm not going to name names, but you can usually find out on Wikipedia whether or not somebody did go to university or start working for a local paper, for example, at the age of 16. It's really easy to do. 8 minutes after 12 is the time. And it popped into my head this morning when I read what is perhaps a slightly snobbish piece in the Guardian newspaper by the former Times editor Simon Jenkins. And it appears under the headline, actually I've lost it, but I'll tell you what the headline is in a minute. But it essentially argues, in the course of the argument, in the course of the article, that we need less university. We should be cutting back on university. Not that necessarily we should be sending fewer people to university, but that the people that we send there should be spending less time there. You could have 2 years, for example, of courses instead of 3, as Joe Johnson, the former universities minister, has argued. And you could perhaps have fewer universities. There are 40 in London at the moment, and Simon Jenkins argues that there really shouldn't be. We could have more vocational colleges, which is something we have talked about on the programme relatively recently. And he poses the question, the headline is, why do people still want to go to university? And he points out that employers are far less obsessed with degrees in general than they used to be. Not just the class of degree, i.e. what grade you got, but also whether you have a degree in the first place. The large accountancy firm EY, which I think used to be Ernst & Young, started disregarding A-levels 10 years ago. Never mind degrees when it was recruiting. It would instead do its own aptitude and behaviour tests. And the headline is, why do people still want to go to university? It's got a brilliant opening line, to be fair. I don't agree with much of what follows, but it's got a brilliant opening line. A Chinese economist once asked me to explain British universities. Why do you take your young, he said, at their most creative age, lock them in a monastery for 3 years and make them drunk? And Jenkins writes that every August he recalls this question when hundreds of thousands of British teenagers scramble to enter university. And that is where we are now, in the moment where thousands of British teenagers are scrambling to enter university and will successfully do so on a scale that hasn't been seen for a number of years. I also remember something that Nick Ferrari said when I was relatively wet behind the ears in this job, and his children obviously are older than mine, and he just said you've got to be careful on results day not to not to upset the kids that maybe haven't done well. You've got to recognise how hard they've done, and to point out or to start asking questions about the wisdom of this or the wisdom of that is a really inconsiderate thing to do. And he was absolutely right. I've never forgotten that. So where are we now? And how are we going to do this together? It's our final hour together for a couple of weeks, by the way, so make the most of it. You might want to press a button that makes it go a bit more slowly so that you can savour it and string it out for a little bit longer. Why do people still want to go to university? I think that might just be my phone-in question. And if you are of that age, then you can come at it from the actual moment that you're currently in. Why do you want to go to university? Just tell me why you want to go to university. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Why do you want to go to university? And if, like me, you did go, what do you think now? I mean, what I suppose is most interesting is the graduate that is discouraging their own child from going. We did this conversation the other way around earlier in the week when we were talking about jobs in the construction sector, and a number of fellas rang in, I think they were all fellas, rang in to say, I work in construction, I work with my hands, skilled labour, and I wanted my sons to get degrees. I remember speaking to one whose son was a lawyer, and the prospects and the security that you expected aren't necessarily in place anymore. And yet for me, and this is where I think sound a little bit out of touch or out of date, for me, the degree is worth so much more than just the passport that it provides to possible futures. And that's why I don't actually know what the answer is today. I would once have passionately argued that as many people as possible could go. I really would. I would once have passionately argued that the horizons it throws open and the worlds it opens up to you are invaluable and innumerable. And unless you do this thing where you get to spend 3 years of your life expanding your social and intellectual horizons, then you can never truly know the value of it. But I don't really know anymore. And one of the reasons why I don't know is because of that relationship between exertion and expectation. You don't get necessarily and you're still guaranteed to do better. Or I beg your pardon, you're still much, much more likely to do better with a degree. I think £10,000 a year better on average than you are without. But that doesn't necessarily answer the question of why you still want to go to university. I also have a problem with my own experiences. I wasted my time at university. Whether it's because of undiagnosed ADHD or some other issue, I do not know. But I wasted my time, and I wasted quite a lot of money, but nowhere near as much money as I would be wasting if I went there today, or at least nowhere near as much of my own money or my mum and dad's money as I would be wasting if I were to go to university today. And I tend not to talk about my children on the programme in specifics, but suffice it to say, I now know what it's like to live in a house where a university student takes their studies incredibly seriously and truly loves them. So for me, my degree was a bit like writing a book, in that there are moments of magic. There are moments when you truly feel like you're flying, but they are so few and far between that you can barely believe the amount of time that has ticked past in between those moments of magic. And I've got a degree to show for it that took 4 years, actually. I'm afraid I took the scenic route to my degree. And I've got 3 books to show for it, but the midwifery, the process of birthing those books and that degree was unbearable. And I find it really, really hard to engage. And I used to let that influence my attitude to university, but that's a me problem, not a university problem. So imagine, and I should give you the reveal, shouldn't I, on how many A-levels that teenager got. I'll do that after the next hiatus. I'll do that when we come back from the next junction. I want to know why you have changed your mind about university, if you used to think that it is a good thing to do, a necessary, a desirable. I want to know why you still want to go to university. In specifics, you might think it's boring, but it isn't. I want to know. I'm so much out of that age range now, 30 years out of university. Why do people still want to go when the obvious relationship between exertion and expectation is nothing like what it used to be? And then fellow parents. Sound like Steve Buscemi then. Fellow youths. Fellow parents. Have you been surprised? Because this is about the world changing. Let me give you a quick heads up on something. The moments of fascination. They're not quite penny drop moments. There's something a little bit different from that. But one of the abiding memories I have of conversations about NEETs or about young people who aren't in education, employment, or training are the number of parents that have contacted us to say, my kids don't engage with it, and I don't blame them. That really shocked me when it first happened, and then it happened again and again and again. It was as if the rat race, I don't want to turn into a Ray Davies lyric, but it was as if the idea of the social contract had been so completely destroyed that you couldn't blame your own child for not wanting to take a 0 hours contract or take a job in the service sector or whatever it was. And I suspect there'd be some degree level equivalence to that as well. There's no point my child getting a degree because it doesn't deliver any of the things that it used to deliver. So there we go, okay? 0345 6060973 is the number you need to tell me why you still want to go to university, or indeed why you no longer think it's worth it. Right, I've said the number enough. It's 1217.
James O'Brien on LBC.
I hate it when that happens. My inbox kind of ran away with me after I asked what's the most snobbish opinion you hold. You weren't supposed to answer it, but some people have. Clementine, my current favourite, people who use glass chopping boards are common. Is that going to set off I mean, are they really? Why? Why would a glass chopping board? Not good for the knives, Keith says, who has a culinary bent he may not be aware of. You should have seen how excited he was when Jamie Oliver came into the studio. And he's popping up soon. He's coming back in, Keith. He's doing full disclosure soon when I get back from my holidays. I didn't know a glass chopping board had snobbish connotations. I really didn't. And quite a lot of snobbishness, like mine, seems to be linked to universities as well. Michael claims not knowing how to make guacamole is a sure sign of being from the non-university classes. Well, not if you're Mexican, Michael. I wouldn't have thought. 19 after 12 is the time. Why do you still want to go to university, and why do you think some young people shouldn't? Why would you divert that course now in ways that you wouldn't have done 10, 20, 30 years ago? Edie is in Greenwich. Edie, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi.
Hello.
I'm currently doing a master's, and I finished my degree last year, and I'm quite for university. I'm doing a creative degree in photography, and the things I do understand the viewpoint of it being a waste of time depending on the subject, but for me, I've learned ceramics, I've learned how to use analog film, I've learned how to use digital film, so many things that I would never have learned maybe going straight into the career world, they might push me in a certain direction.
And learning for learning's sake is a beautiful thing, actually. Even if you don't necessarily put some of these things to use in work, they stay with you for life.
Exactly that. And I don't think I ever would have picked up ceramics if I hadn't have gone. But I do realise it's a massive privilege, and I'm in loads of debt, so there's that side.
How does that sit with you? I mean, talk to me about the debt, if it's not too traumatic for you. Is it? Do you think about it? Once a week, once a month, every night?
You know what? It's sort of. I try and live day by day anyway, so you never know what's going to happen. But it's kind of. To me, it feels so far in the future because you have to earn over a certain threshold anyway, which is nothing like what I've been earning as a student anyway. So it kind of feels like once I hit that point, it will take the edge off a bit, if you know what I mean.
Well, in other words, you will only be required to pay it back when you can afford to start paying it back.
Of course, but then I do think having that amount, I think it's with my master's now something like over £70,000. It's quite a daunting number to know that's there.
Yeah, it really is. Why did you choose to do the master's?
Because I wasn't ready to go into the world of work, and I still kind of felt like I need to find who I am as an artist. And you don't really get that freedom with cost of living to kind of delve into your hobbies whilst working. So it's the only way, really, for me.
Yeah, I hear you. And if it turns out not to be transactional, if it turns out not to be a golden ticket, then it's very important to remember, as you've done and reminded me, that a lot of these values aren't material. A lot of these values aren't measurable. That's the thing that depresses me about fees in general, about tuition fees in general, and about modern experiences, more recent experiences in particular, is that idea that it becomes increasingly commoditized. It becomes, in fact, some Tories have started saying it out loud, if it doesn't lead to an actual career, if it's not immediately vocational, then it's worthless, which I think is a deeply depressing thought. I said I'd do this, and I'll do it while I remember. An 18-year-old with a higher IQ than Stephen Hawking has passed how many A-levels? This is a young woman called Manor Chima, who has an IQ of 161, which is just below Keith's. She's got 23 A-levels, Keith. 23 grades A or A star. She's been doing them all along. In fact, she got into trouble with her school. This is fantastic. She got into trouble with her school for her attendance because she was taking so much time off from lessons to sit all these exams. That's almost perfect, isn't it? That's like Franz Kafka coming up with an educational conundrum. Why are you at home? Why have you come home and been excluded? I don't know if she was excluded. Don't quote me on that. But she certainly got into a little bit of bother with her school in northwest London because she was missing so much school to sit the A-levels, which presumably contribute to their league table standing anyway. Thank you, Edie. Verity's in Bradford. Verity, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Good to speak to you twice in a week, which I wasn't expecting.
That's not allowed. Who put you through? Hang on a minute, I'm just going to have words with the producer. Can you put those cupcakes back in the box, please? Verity's been on twice this week. That's not allowed on this programme. It's not the breakfast show. Carry on, Verity.
Thank you. So I went to university 18 years ago. I got my A-level results 18 years ago. I did classical civilization at university, and I worked in museums and heritage as my career. I've also done other non-related jobs as a way of just paying my way while getting relevant experience.
Yes.
But so I still pay tuition fees. I appreciate it's harder now for young people with the cost of fees and the cost of living and so on. But I really think there's just been it's been lost sight of in terms of the reason for university and the purpose of university, in terms of the thirst for knowledge and learning, which was one of my primary reasons, as well as the things that come with that life experience, having a good time, getting to know people. I've made some of the best friends for life at university. And I also, at the time, went back and did a master's degree after a year out, earning some money, because at the time I saw it as a way to get into my career. And now actually the world of arts and culture is kind of changed a bit in terms of not placing so much emphasis on a degree and other routes of entry, especially within museums. There's been a lot of pushback on going, you shouldn't just have to have a master's degree to be able to learn. So
it should be more open then. It should be more accessible. So that's a good thing. Even though, I mean, it's not ideal if you're the one with the masters, is it? But you can see the greater good here.
There's value on all different routes into the sector, which has changed massively over the last 15 years since I graduated.
It's a great.
But I will always defend my master's degree. Like I went to a brilliant department for museum studies for my master's degree, the first place to offer a course in it at the University of Leicester, and I will always remember that time fondly. That taught me a huge amount. That year was very full and very life-changing.
That sometimes seems to be missing from these. When self-appointed clever clogs write articles, and self-appointed people with degrees write articles about why fewer people should get degrees. It misses the intangibles, doesn't it? It misses the unmeasurables.
Yeah, I also think just this shift in terms of ever since Michael Gove said, we don't need experts.
Yeah, we're still paying the price of that.
It's now
position.
about exactly, and universities are having to fight ever more. I work in one part-time, and they're having to fight ever more for funding and things. I just don't think there's been enough investment by any government
No, well, it's been the opposite. It's been the opposite with tuition fees and things like that. They've sought to spend less money on educating people. You remind me as well of the social mobility element of this, which is where I get maybe a little bit rose-tinted, because I think, you go to a private school or you come from a middle-class background, the passage into university is almost silk smooth. It is just the next notch on a conveyor belt. And that wasn't true in 1997 for any other class. It was simply not true in 1997 that university was a presumed destination for millions of young people. It was only a presumed destination for young people from certain backgrounds. And Tony Blair successfully changed that. And to start picking away at that progress and that success feels wrong, but it doesn't mean that it is wrong. It may well be that the system is improvable, or that some people are being encouraged down paths that they shouldn't be going down. But I remember actually, oddly, because he's quoted in Simon Jenkins's piece, I remember when Joe Johnson was talking about this. I think I interviewed him on the telly. I think it was on a Newsnight. And I remember asking him if he would want his own children to go down the path that he was describing. And I like Joe Johnson, but I don't think he did want his own children to go down the path that he was describing, any more than I suspect Simon Jenkins would want his to. So I wonder, when he writes about the possibility that the courses could be shortened, or the number of universities could be reduced, and the number of young people going down this path could be reduced as well. People like me, I don't think, are ever talking about our own children when we have conversations like this. I think that's a problem. I really do. And I think some of the right-wing opposition to university education is because it's such a catalyst for social mobility. It's like privilege, right? You live in a system that's grossly unfair, but you're on the right side of the unfairness. What's the worst thing that could happen? We become more meritocratic, you know? You actually take the son of a coal miner or the daughter of a hospital cleaner, and you provide them with an education that allows their natural superior intelligence to outshine yours. In what possible world would Jacob Rees-Mogg have ended up where he ended up if he'd been born to humble beginnings? It's impossible that he would have scaled the heights in life that he has scaled, because he is, to coin a phrase, in many ways as thick as mince. And yet our system, our society, reserves the grandest prizes and the shiniest baubles for people who've come through that system, you know? And university education is a leveller. It's an inadequate leveller, but it's a great leveller. Nothing can ever truly level out our class system, because you will always have patronage, privilege, and possession. But university education historically is what allows somebody like John Prescott to end up as Deputy Prime Minister. I don't know. It just always strikes me that it's never their own children they're talking about. 12:30 is the time. Amelia Cox has the headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
I missed information, actually. I'd forgotten about it. And it's one of the hardiest perennials in the world of missed information. Stand by, Keith. I'll be activating the missed information button you will. I'll be activating you to activate the missed information button to activate Emily Maitlis in the next 10 minutes or so. And full disclosure this week is with Cariad Lloyd, who does you'll know her as a comedian and all-round good egg, but I first met her doing her podcast about grief, which is an incredibly powerful piece of work. It's a lovely interview. I'll show you a little clip of that shortly as well. But first, university. Why? And this notion I have that it is something that some people are seeking to diminish and dismantle, and that must be a bad thing because they're such great engines of social mobility and self-improvement, even if they're no longer quite the passport to a better future than they used to be. Is that correct? Is it enough to resist calls for fewer young people to go to university, almost always made by older people who aren't talking about their own children? That's the sort of fancy pants analysis of this moment as A-level students begin to find out where they're going to be going in September or next year. And the much simpler way into it is, why do you still want to go to university? Or conversely, why do you think fewer young people should go? You know the number. Sebastian is in Worthing. Sebastian, what would you like to say?
Hi there, James.
Hello.
What an honour it is to speak with you.
Don't
Sorry
be
if I'm a bit
ridiculous.
nervous.
Don't be ridiculous. It's not an honour at all, and it's only me, so don't be nervous. What made you pick up the phone, mate?
Well, I'm a university student currently. I'm 19 years old and I'm doing an undergraduate degree.
Yeah.
And the change that I've noticed in the way that I learn is monumental. And I completely agree with you that it's so important. And I don't want to oversimplify it, but I think one of the reasons why it's almost been demonised recently, and the reason why these headlines are coming out, I think it's because of the different reasons why people go to university.
Go on.
I don't want to oversimplify it, but the two that I kind of see are, one is sort of a love of learning. If you just love learning and you're an absolute nerd, as I claim to be, you go to university to study your subject. And then you get out of there and you do your degree and you get a job in your field. That's one of the routes. The other route that I can see is that it's almost a place for you to go if you don't have a sense of direction or what you know you want to do. You go there to give yourself some more time to figure out what you want to do. I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
Sure,
of course
it's like a holding pattern. Like a holding pattern. I mean, to have a clear ambition at the age of 18 is actually quite rare. But if you've been educated, if you've been more or less conscious since the age of 11 that you're probably going to go to university next, then you kind of have the knowledge that you're not in a rush to make the next big decision, don't you? Because you're going to have that 3-year hiatus in which to frame your thoughts more clearly.
Right. I'm not claiming that, everyone who goes to university, of course, knows what they're going to do afterwards. But I think the way it's set up in the UK with having a 3-year degree or a 4-year degree, whereby you study one subject, that's all you do for 3 years, unlike other colleges where you major in a certain subject, where that gives you more of a breadth to know what you want to study and to hone in on. And I feel like people who go to university necessarily without a direction and are going to figure that out don't often get that in the UK. And I think that's why a lot of university students come out of UK universities without that direction still, even after the 3 years.
And so that's a systemic issue rather than a generic issue, isn't it? So university, it's not an argument against university, it's a criticism of how universities are currently conducting themselves.
Absolutely.
I like that.
So I would say it's almost like when you come out of university and you don't have a direction, if that's the case, that's where the demonisation comes, because people see all these university graduates without graduate jobs and are going, well, what's the point of universities then?
Well, you answer that question for me. What is the point of university beyond getting a graduate job for a graduate?
Right. I can only speak in my experience, I think. But for me, I'm studying politics and international relations. And when I came into university out of college, I was quite, as you described earlier, people can be very sort of firm in their beliefs and argue it for the rest of their life. That's how I felt like I was. And then I've gone to university, and the way I'd summarise it, I think it's made me shut my mouth and open my mind. I think that's how I would summarise it.
Wow.
And it's such a
beautiful phrase.
Powerful
it's
tool.
A beautiful phrase, that. Well, a nice one, mate.
I think I stole that from a lyric. It was "Shut your mouth and open your eyes" from Spotify, I think. But
shut your mouth and open your mind. That's lovely. That, and I mean, you've probably been a little bit hard on yourself. Even, to have arrived at that conclusion at 19 means you were almost certainly a lot more open-minded as an 18-year-old than you're giving yourself credit for. But it's hard to articulate, isn't it? That sense of the world being so much bigger than you realised.
And I think university makes you realise that, it forces, especially in a degree that I'm doing, where you're taking in so many opinions and having to almost collate them all. It really knocks you off your pedestal if you've built yourself up on one of this idea that you have. And it's beautiful, because learning for learning's sake is obviously really important, but learning to love learning is almost more important, I would say, because we almost lose that when you get older. You get older and you sort of stop wanting to learn. You give up on learning new things, whereas having that curiosity and having that learning, which I believe comes from a university degree, or at least can come from a university degree, is extremely important. And I think the system that we have at the moment doesn't facilitate that.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. And it takes us beyond, I mean, you probably need to be where you are in life at the moment to appreciate that as keenly as you do, because when you are where I am in life at the moment, you sometimes can't see the wood for the trees. So you're having a philosophical conversation about the value of degree-level education, but you're not having a conversation about the detail of degree-level education. Two things can be true at the same time, which is becoming a phrase I put out several times a show at the moment. But that idea that it is a catalyst, a huge catalyst for social mobility, but that students could be better served by their universities is a very different argument from the idea that fewer people should be going, fewer students should be going. 20 minutes to 1 is the time. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. Tom points out, I think with a degree of fairness, that £30,000 to £50,000 worth of debt is an awfully high price to pay to find out what you want to do. But of course, as Sebastian reminded us, it's about so much more than that. You see, I mean, again, I sort of wonder whether I need to give my head a wobble on this one, because I said to you a moment ago that I wasted my time at university, but in many ways I didn't. You know, I learned things that may not have come up in exams or are likely ever to be examined that I wouldn't have learned in any other context. And I made friendships and connections that persist to this day. And they are with people who did not have backgrounds identical to mine, or did not have a much more diverse range of friends than I would have had when I left school, for example. And that's one of the great advantages of university, but elements of that could be replicated in a non-university environment. I don't know quite what it would look like. Youth theatre for me was another very, very seminal experience, partly because it introduced me to people I wouldn't have met in the ordinary course of my life, and if I just stayed on the rails that I was put on as a child. Thank you, Sebastian. I'm going to do this one because these stories drive me absolutely potty.
Missed information.
Thank you, Emily. This is from the Daily Telegraph. A Labour-run council has ordered the removal of Union and St George's flags from lampposts. Right, you're supposed to get very cross at this moment and start shouting and screaming about patriotism and wokeness, and I don't need to read the rest of this story to tell you what has happened. I can tell you now, I wrote about this story 6 years ago. How did you do that, James? How did you manage to write about something 6 years ago that's only happened this week? Because it happens all the flipping time. I wrote about it in How to Be Right in a World Gone Wrong, which is currently available as part of Audible's 2-for-1 deal. If you haven't had the pleasure of having my dulcet... In fact, while I'm away on my holidays and you find yourself missing my dulcet tones, what better way to fill that void in your life than to download one of my books via the audio version, or, of course, the podcasts that are available on Global Player. But the first book, How to Be Right, is currently available as part of Audible's 2-for-1 promotion, and in it I write about these stories. I write about precisely these stories. It's not a bargain bin. It's an honour reserved for the most popular authors on the site. Yeah, I mean, the really, really popular authors, they give it away for free. So, no, it's an honour to be part of the 2-for-1. How dare you suggest that it was some sign of bargain binnery? I wrote about this in that book because the other great example of it is Winterval, where a worker for the council in Birmingham came up with a money-saving idea not to take down the lights that marking festivals. So I forget what all the festivals were. Christmas was one of them. Diwali, I think, was probably another one. And there was would it be Eid? I can't even remember. But they decided to leave the lights up because that is a lot cheaper than sending out crews of council workers to take the lights down and then put them up again and then take them down and then put them up again. You know where I'm going with this, and then take them down and then put them up again. So this councillor, and I even found out his name when I wrote this book, came up with the idea of leaving them up, but that meant you can't call them Christmas lights because they're also going to be up when we celebrate these other things as well. So we'll just call it Winterval. And it reached the Archbishop. The Archbishop started complaining about some sort of assault on Christianity when it was absolutely nothing of the sort. And then you get it with St George's flags, usually during the football, when the residents resident of a council-owned property has been told to take down their flag from the communal area. But guess what? Turns out you're not allowed to put up any flags at all because it's a sort of health and safety issue, or even a sort of tone issue. You're not allowed to put up a James O'Brien is God flag, or a James O'Brien is awful flag, or a I love peas flag. You're not allowed to put up anything. You're not allowed to put up any flags at all. But by the time it's been through the mangle that passes for editorial policy at the Daily Telegraph, it's an assault upon our patriotic pride. So let's read the rest of the article and find out whether I've just embarrassed myself by getting it wrong. Residents in Birmingham have installed hundreds of flags in the past fortnight in a patriotic outpouring. There we go. Patriotic outpouring, everybody. Ding, 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 ding. However, on Tuesday, the council announced plans to remove them, claiming that they... Here we go. Placing unauthorised attachments on street furniture, particularly tall structures like lampposts, can be dangerous. So it has absolutely nothing to do with the nature of the flag and everything to do with the fact that it's a flag. It doesn't stop them from claiming that it shows utter contempt for the British people, in quotes. Presumably a quote from Billy Bunchernumbers with a bulldog avatar somewhere in the outer reaches of Twitter. And my God, just because, just when you thought you couldn't stoop any lower in pursuit of commentary, up pops 30p Lee to say, this is nothing short of a disgrace and shows utter contempt for the British people. Why, mate? It's a health and safety ruling about all flags. Those sort of fears that we have that things might be going a little bit backwards when it comes to working out what's actually going on, as opposed to very carefully cultivated provocations which appeal to both ignorance and bigotry. Here we are. Our national flags are nothing to be ashamed of. Labour rushing to rip them down is shameful, says Robert Alden, the leader of the authorities' Conservative opposition. All either too stupid to understand or deliberately ignoring the fact that all flags put up in those circumstances will be taken down under this instruction. I don't even know whether it's encouraging or depressing to reflect upon the fact that these stories come around with such unerring regularity that it's become a matter of, unbelievable ease to pick them apart. And bad news for Britain, even a Make Broccoli Great Again flag would be subject to these rules. It's mad, isn't it? Here's a rule about flags. Do you understand what a rule about flags involves? Yes, I do, James. Well, some of the flags are St. George's. That's outrageous. Get Lee Anderson on the phone immediately. This is absolutely disgusting and disgraceful. You just wonder sometimes. Anyway, far be it from me to wonder whether or not this story has some bearing upon the points I was making 40 minutes ago about university education. Shall we just close the moment?
Missed information.
It's 12:47.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10 to 1, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. David says, I think you forgot to thank Emily for the misinformation jingle. Missed information, David. It's a pun. You're right, I did. Thank you, Emily. Should we do a little bit of this week's full disclosure before we get back to the phones, or not? No, let's take a call first, because Ronnie's been waiting in Stratford. Ronnie, what made you pick up the phone?
James, I consider myself a pathfinder for a generation of gullible individuals.
Oh dear, go on.
I heard your first or second caller, that young lady who was at uni, and honestly my heart just went out for her because I was the same. I was exactly the same, and I literally hear the words that I was sold in the same way, and how they've impacted my life. I'll just give you some numbers, and I promise you're not going to believe these, but I'm more than happy to send them in. So let's play a bit of payslip bingo. I'm a high earner.
Yeah.
Have been for a while. You'd imagine on my salary that I would be doing a little bit better than I am, actually. But because of my student finance contributions, £57,000 in debt.
Yeah.
7.9% interest compounded daily. It's absolutely exhausting. And let's just play a bit of payslip bingo, right? The government took on a particular month, let's call it in September last year, right?
Yeah.
Quote unquote, my company paid £15,000 for a month of my work.
Yeah.
What do you think what do you think I got paid to home?
This isn't payslip bingo. This is like your own little version of Mystery Minute. I don't know, but
I think it's important. It's important.
Well, so how much? So after tax, you've probably got about 8, 9, 10 grand, have you?
No.
How much after tax?
No. Student finance got 2,000, and I got just below 3.
Out of 15.
At £15,000, student finance got 2,150. Oh, sorry, I got 4,300. So that's a good. That's a really good one. That's a really good. Let me give you the.
That's a huge. Well, I don't want to get confused by the numbers. It's not my strong suit. But I have two thoughts. The first is, would you be earning anything like the money that you're earning now if you didn't have the degree?
Yeah.
How do you know that?
Because I'm doing something totally different to my degree. I won't tell you what it is.
Okay, it's going to be a little bit
easy to identify me.
No, fair enough, and I don't want you to do that. It could be a bit too cryptic to be helpful, this. But you thought when you did your degree that you'd be earning even more than you are now?
Well, I thought going to I listened to my elders who told me going to degree was going to get me social mobility, but actually what it got me, because I'm from a poor family, I didn't have parents who were going to pay for me through uni. I have got a crippling ring of debt around my neck. For the rest, almost for the rest of my life, and I'm in excess of 6 figures.
Yeah,
and there are months where, like for instance, October 2024, student loan company took £3,000. I got paid, quote unquote, £24,000. My take home pay, £309.
I don't understand that.
Mate, I've had chartered accountants sit down. And it's because I'm the first. Like, I'm literally the first generation of it, right? So there is no existing expertise or experts who are going to walk you and talk you through these sorts of things. But the fact is, when you get to these sorts of, when you earn what these people say, oh, we're never going to get there. Yes, you will, because of fiscal drag. You absolutely are going to get there. The inflation rate, if you put it on a chart, your salary will creep up as a number. Your tax obligations are going to stay exactly where they are now. So £50,000 is going to be, the equivalent of £20,000 in 10 years. But you're going to be on a 6-figure salary, and you're going to be very, very poor for it. And if you came from a poor family,
are you making pension contributions?
£3,000 a month.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I mean that seems egregious to me. I'm just
They get paid more than I do.
Who do?
Student finance.
Yeah, no, I find that incredible. I can't believe that's right. I can't believe that this is...
I'm happy to
No, I'm not accusing you of lying, mate. I just think that you might have ended up... I mean, the various reasons why you might be making overpayments include your employer has you on the wrong repayment plan. Your employer takes deductions from your salary before you are due to repay. It's just that your situation is close to unique.
It's not.
No, it is.
Every single earner that I know who's earning over 6 figures on student loan plan 2... which, again, with the first generation of student loan plan 2, that are earning. There's not many of us. It's not like a whole tribe of us.
Well, why? Tell me what it is about. What is it about that tribe then that distinguishes them from all the others? Is it the fact that you had no family support at all? Because I can't.
Yeah,
that's it.
No one to pay the rate.
So you had to borrow all of it.
Loan. We had to borrow. I didn't have any funding for uni. I had the full maintenance loan, I had the grant, I had the tuition fees loan. I failed a year, so I did an extra year as well, so I had to pay all of that as well.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And you'd think, that's okay, I'm going to pull my socks up, I'm going to work my backside off, and it's going to be all right. If I'd taken home £309 a day and my somebody who's DOSed their entire time at uni got better.
And that is the minimum that you have to pay is what they're taking every month.
Well, the more I get paid, the more egregious the payments to student loans.
But they take the minimum. The minimum that they take on whatever your gross is what they take out. Because I mean, an awful lot of people are getting in touch to say they don't recognise the reality that you're describing. But I'm not challenging you on that. I just wonder whether the situation you describe is so specific that you don't really become a deterrent to other people. And there's always the subtext that you wouldn't be doing the job. Many people in your situation wouldn't be doing the job that they're doing if they hadn't been to university in the first place. It may not apply to you, but it would apply to most people earning in the sort of region of £150,000 to £200,000 a year. In fact, if we looked at the percentage of people in that category who've got a degree compared to people who haven't got a degree, I don't think there'd be any dispute whatsoever, would there?
See, I think having a degree is totally different to doing a degree which pays you that sort of money. Because, like, in my experience, like, the job I'm doing didn't exist when I was growing up. I didn't realise that was where I could have ended up.
And therefore you wouldn't have needed to go to university to do it. Well, I think, look, next time we'll need more detail to be more helpful to other people if we're going to hold you up as a poster boy for not doing a degree, and indeed as a deterrent. Then we would need a little bit more detail, oddly, than the numbers. Ronnie, take care. Thank you for that, mate. A little clip of this week's Full Disclosure with Cariad Lloyd, who is, I mean, somewhat oddly known as a comedian, but also known for her Griefcast podcast, because she lost her dad at a very young age and has done incredible work in making conversations about grief become more commonplace.
My brother was 19 when he died, and they'd had a very, classic teenage son, tempestuous relationship, and they were coming through the other side of that. And so they'd kind of reached that point where, you have the conversations and you sit down with each other and you say, hey, look, I was also young once, but me and my dad just hadn't got there. We were still at the, like, you can just leave me alone. Like, drive me to my friends.
and that didn't change when the diagnosis came in. I know you've written about this.
No, it was...
Because you can't...
I was too young, and he was a stubborn arsehole, and I tried to talk to him, and he couldn't. He just kind of shut down.
He knew how dire the diagnosis was, or...?
Well, we don't know, because he just acted all the time like it wasn't happening.
Right.
So one of my memories, I think I wrote about this, is my mum trying to say, Pete, like, what do you want for your funeral? And he was like, get a notepad, Cariad, right. Next week, I'm going to go to Boston. Write down Boston. Then we'll go, because I've got a conference, and me and my mum just sitting there like, I mean, he's literally yellow, like he was dead within a week from that. But he was a man who never stopped. He was very positive. He was very like, don't give me problems, give me solutions. It was like a mantra in our house. And I think he literally could not accept what was happening. His brain was just like, no, he ran triathlons. He was training for an Ironman. Like, he was at peak fitness. This should not be happening to him at 44. So I think he just went into that kind of magic space of, it's not happening.
That's this week's Full Disclosure with the rather splendid Cariad Lloyd. I'm off for a couple of weeks now. Lewis Goodall, you'll be delighted to learn, will be standing in for me next week. Stand by for news of who is going to be in the chair the week after that. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player and on the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the top stories and opinions. You can put your news categories in the order you want. You can pause and rewind live radio and listen to a range of podcasts. Including the History Guy with Dan Snow, who was such a wonderful guest earlier in the programme. Download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Ben Kentish standing in for Tom Swarbrick. But now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.